The quiet species. For nearly 2 centuries after humanity first stepped onto the galactic stage, they were regarded as little more than a curiosity. The galaxy was vast, filled with ancient civilizations that had mastered faster-than-light travel long before humans even understood the structure of their own solar system. Among these civilizations, strength was measured in fleets, territory, and the willingness to wage war. Humans, however, did none of these things. When they were first admitted into the Galactic Concord, a massive alliance of species that governed interstellar relations, many believed humanity would quickly adopt the same aggressive policies as everyone else. History suggested they would. After all, the archives of Earth revealed thousands of wars across their own world. Yet the humans surprised everyone. They built trade routes instead of battle fleets. They invested in diplomacy rather than military alliances. They colonized carefully, choosing distant systems that no one else had claimed rather than competing for valuable territories. To many alien observers, this behavior seemed strange. To others, it seemed weak. In the towering chambers of the Concorde's central station, analysts often debated the nature of humanity. Entire reports were written about their psychology, their history, and their potential as a future power. Most of those reports reached the same conclusion. Humans dreaded war. The reasoning appeared simple. The species had experienced catastrophic conflicts in its early history, wars that nearly destroyed their own civilization. Nuclear weapons, biological disasters, and global devastation had scarred their past. According to the analysts, humanity had learned to avoid war at all costs. Some respected this philosophy. Others saw it as an opportunity. Among those who dismissed humanity most openly was the Karthuun Empire. The Karthuun were feared across the galaxy. Towering, armored beings with thick crimson skin and brutal military traditions, they believed that strength was the only law worth following. Their empire had grown through conquest. World after world had fallen beneath their fleets. Entire species had been forced into servitude. In the Karthuun War Council, peace was considered little more than a pause between battles. So when the expansion of human colonies began approaching the outer regions of Karthuun territory, the reaction was immediate. Concern was not the word for it. Contempt was. Inside a massive war chamber carved into black stone and steel, the Karthuun High Commander studied a holographic map of nearby star systems. One small cluster glowed with a faint blue marker. Human territory. Explain again, the commander growled, his deep voice echoing across the chamber. An intelligence officer stepped forward. The humans have established a colony in the Helios system. Their population is approximately 400,000. The commander narrowed his eyes. Military presence. Minimal. A few patrol vessels and orbital stations. No significant defenses. A low rumble of laughter spread across the council. Another officer added, "Our analysts confirm what the Concord believes. Humans fear war. They prefer negotiation." The commander leaned back in his seat. Then they will surrender easily. Across the galaxy, humanity remained unaware of the decision that had just been made. On the frontier world of Helios 9, life continued peacefully. The colony had been built on a wide ocean planet dotted with island chains and bright blue skies. Research stations floated above the water, studying the alien ecosystem, while cargo ships moved quietly between orbit and the surface. The settlers believed they were far from danger. They believed the galaxy had moved beyond conquest. They were wrong. The attack came without warning. Karthuun warships emerged from hyperspace like dark shadows, tearing through the stars. Massive cruisers surrounded the planet in seconds, their weapons powering up before the orbital stations could even send a distress signal. The first strike destroyed the colony's communication satellites. The second annihilated its defense platforms. Within minutes, Helios 9 was completely helpless. Dropships filled the skies as armored Karthuun soldiers descended toward the surface. Cities burned. Colonists were captured. Resistance was crushed before it could even begin. By the time the smoke cleared, thousands had been taken prisoner. Across human space, the news spread rapidly. The images were horrifying. Burning structures, destroyed habitats, families torn apart. In the United Earth Assembly, leaders from dozens of human worlds gathered in emergency session. The chamber was silent as the footage played across a massive display. When it ended, the Secretary General stood slowly. "What is the status of diplomatic contact with the Karthuun Empire?" she asked. An aide replied, "A message has been sent demanding their withdrawal and the release of our citizens." And their response? The aide hesitated. "None yet." The Secretary General closed her eyes for a moment. Then she gave the order, "Prepare a second message." Around the chamber, advisors exchanged uncertain glances. "What will it say?" one of them asked. The Secretary General looked back at the image of Helios 9. Her voice was calm. "Tell them this is their only warning." Far away, inside the towering fortress of the Karthuun War Council, the message finally arrived. The High Commander listened to the translation with mild amusement. When it finished, he let out a deep laugh. "They demand we return their colonists," he said. One of his generals chuckled. "What do you expect from a species that fears war?" The commander stood and turned toward the star map. "Send them our reply." "What should it say?" The commander's smile widened. "Tell them nothing." The council erupted with laughter. They believed the humans would protest. They believed they would negotiate. They believed they would surrender. What they did not know, what none of them understood, was that far away in human space, something had already begun. Shipyards that once built cargo vessels were quietly changing their designs. Factories were retooling. Naval command centers were activating long-dormant protocols. Humanity had not responded yet, but across the stars, an entire civilization was preparing for something it truly dreaded. War. The awakening. The galaxy expected outrage. After the destruction of Helios 9, countless civilizations watched human space carefully. Many believed the humans would flood the galactic concord with protests, demand sanctions, and beg for protection from stronger allies. Instead, something far more unsettling happened. Humanity went quiet. At first, the silence seemed like confirmation of what everyone believed. The Concord's analysts reported that Earth had issued one formal warning to the Karthuun Empire and nothing more. No fleets were mobilized publicly. No war declarations were made. No threats echoed across the stars. To the outside galaxy, humanity appeared frozen by fear. But inside human space, events were moving with quiet precision. Across dozens of star systems, industrial stations shifted their purpose almost overnight. Asteroid mining operations expanded rapidly, drawing enormous quantities of metals and rare elements from entire belts of drifting rock. Shipyards that once produced civilian vessels began constructing something else. Warships, massive ones. Unlike the proud military fleets of other species, human ships were not built for display. They were practical, heavily armored, and packed with systems designed for efficiency and survival. Factories worked without pause. Artificial intelligence coordinated logistics between thousands of locations, ensuring that every component, from reactor cores to targeting arrays, arrived exactly where it was needed. The entire process was frighteningly organized. Deep within Earth's orbital command station, military leaders gathered inside a secure chamber known as strategic control. A massive holographic map floated above the center of the room, displaying the territories of the Karthuun Empire in crimson light. Admiral Elias Ward stood silently beside the projection. For months, his team had studied every known detail of the Karthuun military. Their fleet movements, their supply lines, their shipyard locations, even the personalities of their commanders. Humans had not rushed into war. They had prepared for it. A young officer approached the admiral. "Sir, all fleet production schedules are on target." Ward nodded slowly. "Status of Protocol Aegis? Phase 2 is now active across all sectors." The room fell quiet for a moment. Protocol Aegis had been created decades earlier, shortly after humanity joined the galactic community. It was a contingency plan for the worst possible scenario, a hostile empire attacking human worlds. Most believed it would never be used. now was unfolding exactly as designed. Ward studied the holographic star map carefully. "The Karthuun believe we are afraid," he said quietly. No one disagreed. Across the galaxy, the Karthuun Empire celebrated its victory at Helios 9. The captured colonists had been transported to labor worlds deep within their territory, while their war fleets continued patrolling nearby systems. In the capital fortress of the Empire, the High Commander reviewed reports from his scouts. "Human activity?" he asked. An officer bowed his head respectfully. "They're increasing industrial production, Commander. Several new ships have been observed." "Warships?" "Yes." The commander shrugged. "Defensive preparations." Another officer spoke. "They may attempt to protect their borders." "Let them," the commander replied with a dismissive wave. "Humans dread war. They will not bring it to us." The council agreed. For centuries, the Karthuun had conquered species that fought desperately but foolishly. Many civilizations attacked out of anger or pride. Humans were different. They hesitated. They negotiated. They feared destruction. That fear, the Karthuun believed, made them harmless. Weeks passed. Human fleets slowly gathered at the edges of their territory. At first, the number seemed small. A dozen ships here, 20 there. But the movement continued steadily. Unknown to the Karthuun scouts, hundreds of vessels were assembling in deep space staging zones far beyond normal observation routes. Carriers, destroyers, drone command ships. Entire formations waited silently in the darkness between stars. Inside strategic control, Admiral Ward watched the final preparations unfold. A tactical officer spoke softly beside him. "Fleet Groups Alpha through Delta are in position. Communication relays? Ready." Ward folded his arms. "Then begin the countdown." Far away, inside the Karthuun border systems, their fleets continued routine patrols. Cargo convoys moved between military bases, carrying fuel, ammunition, and supplies across the Empire. None of them expected what was about to happen. At precisely the same moment across multiple star systems, human fleets emerged from hyperspace. The attacks were perfectly synchronized. In one system, a Karthuun supply depot exploded as dozens of human strike ships unleashed a barrage of precision missiles. In another, orbital shipyards were crippled by coordinated drone assaults that overwhelmed defensive turrets. Warp relay stations, critical nodes in the Empire's faster-than-light travel network, were destroyed before distress signals could even be transmitted. The Karthuun military command struggled to understand what was happening. Reports flooded their communication channels. Supply Station Delta destroyed. Shipyard Gamma under heavy attack. Warp relays offline across Sector 3. Within a single hour, 27 major military targets were eliminated. The Empire's logistics network collapsed into chaos. Inside the War Council chamber, the High Commander stared at the incoming reports with disbelief. "This is impossible," one general muttered. "Where did these fleets come from?" Another officer answered with visible unease. "Human space." The commander clenched his fists. "How many ships?" The officer hesitated. "More than we estimated. Far more." Across the galaxy, observers watched the unfolding events with shock. Human fleets were not fighting recklessly. They struck with surgical precision, destroying only the targets that supported the Karthuun war machine. Supply routes, manufacturing centers, communication nodes. It was a campaign designed not for glory, but for efficiency. A Concord strategist studying the battle data whispered to herself as the reports appeared on her screen. "They're not reacting emotionally." Her colleague looked over. "What do you mean?" She gestured to the tactical map. "This was planned months ago." The human fleets moved with terrifying coordination, guided by advanced AI battle systems that allowed hundreds of ships to operate as a single unit. There was no confusion, no hesitation, only calculated action. The strategist leaned back in her chair, her voice barely audible. "They do fear war." Her colleague frowned. "Then why are they fighting like this?" She stared at the destruction spreading across Karthuun territory. "Because they understand it. And far away, in the depths of human space, More fleets were already preparing to move. The first strikes had only just begun. The storm of humanity. The first human strikes shattered the illusion of Karthuan superiority, but the Empire was far from defeated. Across their vast territory, alarms echoed through military command centers as fleets were recalled and defensive lines were formed. The Karthuan Empire had conquered dozens of civilizations over centuries, and their war machine was enormous. If humanity believed a few strategic attacks could break them, they would soon learn otherwise. The High Commander of the Karthuan Empire stood before a massive holographic battlefield map, his crimson face hardened with rage. "Recall every fleet," he ordered. Generals rushed to obey. Hundreds of Karthuan warships were redirected toward the frontier. Massive battle cruisers, each built for brutal close-range combat, formed into powerful armadas designed to crush the invading human forces. For the first time since the attacks began, the Karthuan prepared for open war. Their commanders were confident. Yes, the humans had launched clever strikes. Yes, they had disrupted supply lines. But wars were not won by sabotage alone. They were won by fleets. And the Karthuan had far more ships than humanity could possibly field. In deep space, near the shattered remains of a Karthuan relay station, Admiral Elias Ward watched the tactical display aboard his flagship. The human fleet surrounding him stretched across thousands of kilometers, sleek warships moving in precise formations, their engines glowing faintly in the darkness. A tactical officer spoke from the command pit. "Enemy fleet detected, Admiral. Estimated strength, 200 ships." Ward studied the data calmly. Composition: heavy cruisers and assault carriers. A murmur spread across the bridge. The Karthuan ships were massive and heavily armored. In direct combat, they were built to overpower most opponents through sheer force. Another officer asked carefully, "Do we withdraw to secondary positions?" Ward shook his head. "No." He stepped closer to the display. "Engage." Moments later, the two fleets collided in the silent void of space. The Karthuan armada advanced like a wall of steel, their cannons blazing as they attempted to crush the human formation head-on. But the humans did not fight the way their enemies expected. Instead of meeting the charge directly, human ships split into dozens of smaller groups. Fast destroyers and drone carriers scattered across the battlefield, moving in constantly shifting formations. Thousands of autonomous drones poured from launch bays like swarms of mechanical insects. The Karthuan guns roared as they destroyed dozens of them instantly. But for every drone destroyed, 10 more appeared. Explosive charges ripped into Karthuan hulls, damaging sensors and weapon systems. Meanwhile, human destroyers struck quickly and retreated before the heavier enemy ships could respond. The battle became chaotic. Karthuan commanders struggled to track the constantly moving targets. Their strategy depended on overwhelming force, but the humans refused to fight in predictable ways. Inside his command chamber, the Karthuan fleet admiral growled in frustration. "Why won't they stand and fight?" An officer answered nervously. "They're using adaptive tactics, sir. Every maneuver changes based on our movements." On the opposite side of the battlefield, Admiral Ward watched the conflict unfold through streams of AI-generated analysis. Human ships were not acting independently. They were connected. Every vessel in the fleet shared real-time tactical information through an advanced combat network, allowing them to react instantly to enemy actions. What appeared chaotic to the Karthuan was actually carefully coordinated strategy. "Drone strike pattern 3, Ward ordered." Seconds later, hundreds of drones converged on a single Karthuan cruiser. The massive ship unleashed a devastating barrage, destroying many of the attackers. But the swarm kept coming. Explosions erupted across the cruiser's surface as its defenses were overwhelmed. The ship broke apart in a brilliant flash of light. Across the battlefield, similar attacks unfolded again and again. The Karthuan ships were powerful, but they were slow to adapt. Human fleets fought like living organisms, constantly shifting, learning, and adjusting. Within hours, the Karthuan armada began to collapse. One damaged cruiser attempted to retreat, only to be intercepted by human interceptors that disabled its engines. Another command ship exploded after a coordinated torpedo strike destroyed its reactor core. When the battle finally ended, nearly half the Karthuun fleet had been destroyed. The survivors retreated deeper into their territory. Across the galaxy, observers watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. The Karthuun Empire had never suffered a defeat like this. For centuries, their strategy of overwhelming strength had crushed every opponent. But humanity was fighting a different kind of war. A war of calculation, a war of patience, and it was terrifyingly effective. Inside a prison transport ship deep within Karthuun territory, captured human colonists were forced to watch propaganda broadcasts celebrating the Empire's victories. But one evening, the broadcast suddenly changed. Instead of triumphant speeches, the screen showed a news transmission from a neutral Concord station. The report described the destruction of the Karthuun fleet. For a moment, the prisoners simply stared in disbelief. Then someone whispered, "They came for us." Back in human space, Admiral Ward received the battle results. A communications officer spoke. "Enemy fleet retreating, Admiral." Ward nodded slowly. "Expected. Orders." Ward looked at the map of Karthuun territory. The Empire's outer defenses were weakening. Supply networks were still crippled from the earlier strikes. The war was shifting. "Prepare the next offensive," he said quietly. His officers exchanged glances. "Into their territory, sir." Ward's expression remained calm. Yes, the humans had tried diplomacy. They had issued warnings. But the Karthuun Empire had ignored them. Now the war humanity dreaded had fully begun. And the storm of humanity was only growing stronger. Why humans fear war? The war did not last as long as the galaxy expected. 4 generations. The Karthuun Empire had ruled through fear. Entire civilizations had surrendered the moment their fleets appeared, believing resistance was pointless. The Karthuun themselves believed their power was unstoppable. But the war with humanity was different. The Empire had started the conflict believing humans would hesitate. Instead, humanity had advanced with relentless precision. After the devastating fleet battle that shattered the Karthuun Armada, human forces did not pause. Fleet after fleet crossed the frontier and pushed deeper into Karthuun territory. But they did not behave like conquerors. They did not bombard civilian worlds. They did not destroy cities. Instead, human fleets targeted only what mattered: the Empire's ability to wage war. Military shipyards were dismantled. Weapons depots vanished in controlled strikes. Communication relays collapsed under coordinated assaults. Every step followed the same careful pattern. Break the war machine. Leave the people alive. Inside the Karthuun capital system, panic spread through the highest levels of command. The High Commander who had once laughed at humanity now stood before a tactical map filled with blinking warnings. Entire sectors had fallen silent. Military fleets had been destroyed or scattered. Supply routes were gone. One of his generals spoke with growing fear. "Our outer defense rings have collapsed. Human fleets are approaching the capital." The commander stared at the map. For the first time in his life, he felt uncertainty. "How many ships?" he demanded. The answer came quietly. "Too many." Across the galaxy, other civilizations watched the unfolding war with disbelief. The Karthuun Empire had always been considered unstoppable. Their fall seemed impossible. Yet humanity was dismantling them piece by piece. Not through rage, not through reckless destruction, through strategy, through patience, through absolute determination. When the final battle came, it took place in the shadow of the Karthuun homeworld. The Empire had gathered everything they had left. Thousands of warships surrounded the planet in massive defensive rings. It was the largest fleet the Karthuun had ever assembled. They believed numbers alone would finally stop the human advance. But humanity arrived with something the Karthuun had never truly understood: preparation. Human fleets emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Carrier groups, drone swarms, and strike cruisers filled the space between the stars like a silent storm. At the center of the formation was Admiral Ward's flagship. On the bridge, the tactical display lit up with thousands of targets. An officer spoke quietly. Enemy fleet fully deployed. Ward nodded. Activate the network. Across every human ship, a powerful AI battle system connected the fleets into a single coordinated intelligence. Every sensor, every weapon, every tactical prediction merged into one vast strategic mind. The battle began. Karthuun cannons fired in overwhelming waves, lighting the darkness with blazing energy. Human ships responded instantly. Drone swarms surged forward in endless numbers, overwhelming defensive turrets. Fast attack ships slipped between the heavy cruisers, targeting their engines and reactors. Entire sections of the Karthuun defense ring began to collapse. Their ships were strong, but they were isolated. Human fleets fought as one. Within hours, the Karthuun command vessels were destroyed. Without centralized leadership, the defensive formations broke apart. Some ships attempted to flee. Others surrendered. The rest were destroyed. By the time the battle ended, the Karthuun Empire's military power was gone. The war was over. Across the galaxy, the silence that followed felt almost unreal. The civilization that had terrified the stars for centuries had fallen in a matter of months. But what surprised the galaxy even more was what humanity did next. They did not claim Karthuun territory. They did not enslave the defeated empire. Instead, human fleets helped stabilize damaged worlds and released thousands of prisoners taken during Karthuun conquests. When the leaders of the Galactic Concord gathered to discuss the new balance of power, humanity sent a representative to speak before them. The chamber was filled with delegates from dozens of species. All of them wanted the same answer. Why? Why had humanity fought with such terrifying efficiency? And why had they shown mercy afterward? The human ambassador stood calmly before the assembly. For a moment, she simply looked at the silent crowd. Then she spoke. "You believed something about humanity," she said. "You believed we feared war." Many of the delegates shifted uncomfortably. She continued, "You were correct." A ripple of confusion moved through the chamber. The ambassador's voice remained steady. "Humans do fear war, but not because we are weak." She paused. "Our history is filled with it. We have fought wars that nearly destroyed our world. We created weapons capable of ending our entire species." The chamber remained silent. "We know what war becomes when it is allowed to grow without restraint." She looked around the vast hall. "That is why we avoid it. That is why we negotiate, cooperate, and search for peace." Then her expression hardened slightly. "But when war is forced upon us," the room seemed to grow colder. "We finish it." No one spoke after that. The war with the Karthuun Empire became one of the most studied conflicts in galactic history. Not because of how it began, but because of what it revealed. Humanity did dread war. Not because they were incapable of fighting, but because they understood exactly how devastating they could be when they finally chose to.